The rumors began months ago, first on the whispernet of the indie board game blogs. Then they moved to the BGG forums, the YouTube previewers, and finally the Dice Tower, who could never let any game pass them by. Techlandia was coming, and it was coming to Kickstarter. Techlandia is a game for 1 to 4 players, where you will play one of 4 bloggers who are trying to sneak into the Techlandia TX1 conference, which is being held in their secretive Silicon Valley headquarters. You are not invited, of course, so are trying to sneak in. In order to do that, you have to collect the 4 fragments of the QR code, which will get you past security. To that end, you will be exploring the public level of the Techlandia headquarters in a dungeon crawl type scenario as you mingle with the crowds of journalists and tech cultists looking for the QR fragments. Your goal is to get to the elevator, which will take you down into the bowels of the headquarters where the conference is taking place. As you explore, you will have to investigate the different rooms, fight tech cultists working for Techlandia, find the QR fragments, and do all this before time runs out. We recently played a preview of Techlandia and came up with the 5 things we liked about the game and 2 things that we didn't and hope are changed in the final release. So, let's jump in. The first and arguably biggest strength of Techlandia is the writing. It's funny, witty, and very smartly written. That's everything from the enemies to the gear cards, locations, and counters. All have flavor text, and the flavor text is really delightfully tongue-in-cheek. Some of our personal favorites include the dead battery encounter that says, 2-hour battery life on a $1,000 cell phone? Sounds about right. And then tells you to move to the press room to recharge your phone. And then there's the Jargon Gorgon, one of the enemies whose description reads, "This unctuous beast hypnotizes audiences with non-stop jargon, never using one word when a dozen bigger ones will do." And this is all furthered by the story of the game. You're trying to sneak into the underground auditorium of this giant tech corporation before the conference commences. As the time ticks closer, you start to find that all is not as it seems. The tech cultists seem to have tentacles growing out of their faces, and an ominous black cloud has formed directly above the headquarters, despite Alexa not telling you that there was any rain this morning. Every time you reach a certain number on the Doomsday Clock, a story card is drawn and read aloud to all the players, and this is where you are going to get a lot of those great tidbits of story, as well as the tension of the game building as the time for the conference draws near. We also appreciate how clean and simple the design of the game is. Each component has a lot of thought put into it, from the names and the designs of the different rooms to the smartphone-style dashboards used to track everything about your character, from their skill to their objectivity and the number of QR codes and decryption keys they've collected. The setup is very simple. You put out the central hallway, randomize the other 4 rooms, make the location deck, and choose your blogger and skill. The game is just as easy to learn. Each player gets 2 actions per turn, and they can use those actions to move to an adjacent room, investigate the room, get gear from the press room, pick up a QR code, fight a tech cultist, or submit the QR codes. And then, the first person to get through security and to the elevator wins. We also really like how the QR code and enemy spawning system works. What happens is that whenever you succeed in an investigation, you will draw 2 cards from the location deck. The first of these is where the QR code is going to spawn, and the second one is where the tech cultist who's noticed you snooping around will spawn. This system gives a great controlled randomness to how the enemies come up and where the QR codes go. Each location is only in the deck once, so QR codes and enemies can't spawn on the same location on the same turn. With each investigation, you might get lucky and have the QR code fragments spawn in the room you're standing in, or it might be on the other side of Techlandia, with a horde of tech cultists and bloggers standing in your way. Another thing we really like about the game is collecting all the different pieces that will help you get through security. You first have to sneak around the headquarters, investigating the different rooms to get all 4 of the QR code fragments. But to avoid too much suspicion, you can only successfully investigate each room once. Once you've successfully investigated the room, you'll find the location of one of the QR code fragments. You then have to make your way over there to get it before any of the other tech loggers, who you're competing with, are able to snipe it from in front of you. Once you have all 4 fragments, you can go to security and scan them, but without the decryption codes, you'll only get 1 try. If you scan it and don't get in, your time is up. The tech cultists take you out back, and then the last thing you feel are tentacles wrapping around your body and your mind. If you do have the decryption codes, you get 1 additional try for each one of those that you've collected. You get the decryption codes by fighting the tech cultists, who each carry 1. Whenever you feel confident, or like the other tech blockers are on the cusp of getting in, you can go to security and try your luck. If you succeed in scanning the right QR code, you can now get to the elevator and win the game. And finally, we also love the Doomsday Clock and how it works. It meshes very well with a few different mechanics in order to move the story forward. When a red number on the Doomsday Clock is reached, the corresponding story card is activated and read aloud to the group. This can cause everyone to do an encounter, the executive tech cultist to spawn, and it also gives us some great story. The other thing the Doomsday Clock interacts with is players' health. Since this game does not have player elimination, you take hits to your objectivity instead of your health when fighting tech cultists. It's a battle of wits rather than a battle of brawn. If you take 3 hits to your objectivity, you become a fanboy and try to interfere with the other players by forcing them to spend actions to repel your rabid attempts to defend Techlandia. This condition lasts until the next red number is reached on the Doomsday Clock, at which point you come back to your senses and can continue playing the game. That being said, no game is perfect, and though the game has a lot of great writing and intuitive mechanics, there are some ways to improve. The first improvement we'd like to see is how things are resolved in the game. This is a game that uses a roll to resolve mechanic. You want to investigate a room? Roll a die. You want to fight an enemy? Roll a die. You want to mitigate a bad die roll? Roll again. So all the main actions in the game really do resolve through rolling dice. We're not big fans of these arbitrary systems that rely solely on die rolls. It's why games like Risk or Axis and Allies can be notoriously frustrating. There are some forms of mitigation, through matching skills when fighting tech cultists, or through using your gear cards, but those either give you rerolls or automatic successes, which are not really interesting or fun. It would be nice to see the skills being used slightly differently, possibly giving a static bonus when fighting enemies, or providing a benefit when investigating certain rooms. There are of course many other forms of mitigation in different dice systems, and we hope to see something a bit more fleshed out in the final game. Another thing that could be improved is to add a bit more player interaction. When you're playing the game, there's very little you can do to interfere with the other players beyond sniping the QR code fragments that they've found. You have no control over enemy placement, and you have no actions that can interfere with other players, unless you become the fanboy. It makes the game feel a lot less competitive and not like the race to the finish that you're expecting. Some additional options to either sabotage, move the other players, or hinder them in some other way would make the game feel more like you're competing against the others and not just against the Doomsday Clock. And there you go. We hope that you enjoyed this look at the 5 things we liked about Techlandia and 2 things that we'd like to see improved. Thank you for joining us here at Dragon's Demise. If you enjoyed the video, let us know. We're trying out a new format and would love to know what you think. For more Dragon's Demise content every week, check out our podcast, Twitch channel, and of course, subscribe right here on YouTube.